Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 30th of November 2021. For those watching, I am Councillor Sherry Jesperson and I'm chair of this committee. My first task before we start is to take an alphabetical roll call of the members here present. Members, when I call your name, please can you or I don't have an alphabetical list. I'm going to call your name in the number that in the order that I have them on the chat bar here. So if you could just unmute, say that you're here, and then mute again. So Councillor Belinda Rideout. Councillor Brian Heatley.
Good morning, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carol Jones.
Present.
Councillor David Taylor. Councillor David Taylor.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, muted off.
That's all right. Councillor John Andrews.
Yeah.
Present.
Councillor Emma Parker.
Morning, I'm here.
Councillor Les Fry.
Good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Councillor Matt Hall.
Present.
Councillor Stella Jones.
Good morning.
And Councillor Tim Cook.
Present.
Councillor Val Pothecary.
Present. Good morning.
And Belinda Rideout. I can see you're present because you're on my list. Okay, Belinda Rideout is not with us just at the moment, but she is in the meeting, so she will let us know when she's back with us. Thank you very much.
Here.
Oh, bless you. Thank you, Belinda.
Hello,
Yeah,
I am here. I don't quite know why it's not receiving it.
I knew you were here. That's exactly right. Well, you're doubly welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Right.
You're welcome.
Now, the Dorset councillors we have with us today are Anna Lee, Planning Head of Service, Hannah Smith, Area Planning Manager, Simon Sharp, Senior Planning Officer, Verity Murphy, Senior Planning Officer, Emily Jones, Senior Planning Officer, Emma Ralph, Senior Planning Officer, Phil Crowther is our solicitor, Steve Savage is Transport Development Manager, and he's here for most of the meeting, but he's in the background if we need him for some of our applications. George Dare is our Democratic Services Officer, and Pauline Weld and Judy Saunders are producing the meeting. And the representations are being read by, who's reading our representations today?
It is Jill Whitney. It's Jill Whitney. You've got me again. Sorry.
No, we're very happy to have you, Jill. Jill Whitney is our doing our reading, like from the pulpit. So it's excellent. Thank you very much. Now, members, just to let you know that all of our case officers who are presenting to us today are presenting to this committee for the first time. So I would like to extend a particularly warm welcome to them all. Some are new members of staff, some are just new to us, but you're very, very welcome, all of you. We like to bring the changes here on the Northern Planning Committee. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a really full agenda today. So we will break for lunch on completion of agenda item 4D, the Sir Nabbas Care Centre, and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for item 4E, land at Littledown Shaftesbury. And we will pause for a short break during the morning session or the afternoon session if we need to, but I won't. But we'll see how we go. So first of all, before we start, a word about the procedures for the benefit of the people viewing the meeting. So for each application, I will invite the case officer to present their report and recommendations, followed by presentations from other officers. Members of the public have been invited to submit written representations to a maximum of 450 words. These submissions have all been made available to members of the committee. Up to 3 submissions in support and 3 against may be read to the committee by a council officer. The ward member may address the committee, and finally the applicant's submission is heard. Following these representations, the members of the committee can ask any questions for clarification, and then they will deliberate and come to a view. A little bit of a word on the voting procedures, because we're still in COVID voting procedures, so I'm obliged to explain this to you again. In consultation with group leaders, the Chief Executive has exercised his delegated powers to continue informal meetings of council committees in the light of the COVID requirements to keep people safe. For today's meeting, committee members will express a minded to decision in respect of the recommendations set out in the officer's report. The decision will then be taken under officer delegated authority in the light of the minded to decision. So once the committee has voted, I will turn to Anna Lee, the service manager for planning, who will make her decision, and should her decision differ from the minded to decision that we have made, she will give her reasons. So that's procedural matters. To our agenda then. First of all, just to tell the public and to remind members that agenda item 4F for Grove Farm in Chaffeymore and Bourton has been deferred to a future meeting, hopefully the next meeting, while further information is gathered. So we won't be hearing that one today. Item 1, George, do we have any apologies?
There are no apologies this morning, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, members. Some of you wish to declare an interest in the items before us. Could you let me know that now?
Yes, Chairman, I wish to declare an interest in item 4A and 4B. I know the applicant. I will not speak or vote, and I'll switch my camera off.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fry?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to declare an interest as the ward member in items 4A and B, and I will be speaking as the ward member.
Splendid, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any declarations of interest they need to make? As always, if anything comes to mind as we are going through the agenda, you can always let us know at that point. Item 3, public participation, I've covered. So we can now move promptly on to the meat of the day, which is our planning applications under agenda item 4. Just to remind everybody, our first 2 applications, our first 2 applications, our first 4 agenda items, both have 2 parts, a planning application and a listed building application. So for clarity, and because it's very difficult to separate out those 2 parts of the debate, so we will hear a single presentation by the case officer, a single round of questions and debate, and then we will take a minded to vote first on the planning matters and secondly on the listed building matters. So 1 single debate, but 2 votes. I hope that's clear. So first up, the old military hospital on the Grove Trading Estate in Dorchester. Simon Sharp, this is your report. I think if you would like to take the floor and present it for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, all. Yes, so this presentation is for both items, for 826, which is the planning application, and 827, which is the listed building consent. I think what I'll do without further ado is just go to the PowerPoint presentation, members, and I can take you through the photographs and then the plans.
Thank you very much.
Just checking, members, that you can all see the PowerPoint on the screen.
Yes, thank you. It's very clear.
Brilliant, thank you. So the site is in Dorchester. It's within the built envelope of Dorchester. If members are familiar with Dorchester. This is to the north west of the town centre, which is off to the bottom right of the screen. As you'll see from Dorchester Town Council's comments and also from the ward councillors, it is unequivocally a area of employment uses. So it is, as it says on screen, an industrial estate. That is not without question. The site is here where the star is, and as you can see, all of these units around, all these buildings are commercial units. There is not a residential character around the site. Residential areas are some distance away from the site. So this aerial photograph provides you a bit more clarity on that. You can see these employment uses around. They vary from light industrial and office uses to general industrial uses. There are also other more specific uses that don't easily fall within a use class, but without exception they are employment uses. Just as a matter of context, you can see the railway line going northwards to the Poundbury Tunnel, going towards Yeovil area, County Hall, etc., down here off the screen. So this is the site, and it's a Grade 2 listed building, and of course that is very relevant to your considerations today, members, because not only are there the development plan policies to consider, but there are also the duties under the Listed Building Act. Section 16 for the listed building consent application and Section 66 under the planning application, both of which are there to direct you to ensure that the architectural and historic qualities of the building are preserved, and that's really important when considering this matter. So this is a closer shot of the site. So the site includes the buildings. There are two elements to the buildings. This, which I'm outlining now, is the original building, and then very late in the Victorian era it was extended onto this area, which is under this hipped roof here. As you'll see from the floor plans, under the original roof is an area which has been subdivided from new. So it's been subdivided for over 150 years, and then the wards area, the late Victorian building, was more open, but has had subdivisions in the past as well, and that will become clearer from the floor plans and the photographs. This area of parking is included within the site. This building is excluded, so the site boundary follows around the building, includes the parking area at the front, includes this area at the back, but excludes this building. And there is a photograph out of one of these first floor windows looking over the roof of this building, and members will see the juxtaposition. And I know Dorchester Town Council and the ward councillors have expressed concerns about that juxtaposition, and it is clearly a material consideration here, the proximity of the commercial uses to this proposed residential use and likely amenity effects. And I'll come on to that after the photographs and the plans. So the proposed plan shows an external amenity space to the rear of the building, abutting this commercial use next door. So this is in shaded green, is the amenity space, the external amenity space, shared garden space. This is the proposed parking area, which is beyond that amenity area. Members, you will be able to see there are walls proposed around the amenity space, and then indeed around the parking area. These small squares are the piers along the wall, and then there's further parking area along the front parallel to the road. I think one of the comments made was about the size of the amenity space being the size of a double bed. It's obviously significantly larger than this. You can see, just for comparison, this is a parking space, which is typically 5 metres by 2.5 metres, and you can see that the amenity space covers a much larger area than a single parking space. So that will give you a comparison with regard to the amount of amenity space that's available to residents. So this is the front of the building as existing. So this is the original element here. You can see it with its vertical sliding sash windows, original windows. This porch is a later Victorian addition, but still obviously of architectural and historical quality. This higher element is the late Victorian wing, the ward's wing. And then you can see the commercial uses beyond, and this is where part of the parking is proposed. You can see there is also an external staircase which will be utilised as part of the proposal, and you'll see that on the floor plans. This is the rear of the building, part of the rear of the building. This is the original element. So the amenity space will be here in the foreground with the parking to the right, and you can see that adjoining commercial unit here. And this is the higher late Victorian element, again with the commercial element adjoining it, so the adjoining use here. And then where these cars are parked will be the amenity area with the parking off to the right hand side. And members, here you can see it's a typical rear elevation of a building, quite a hodgepodge of windows. And that's relevant because this is the external alterations are really limited to this rear elevation, and rear elevations of buildings of this period are always quite an eclectic mix of windows. It's not the principal facade. It's been subject to changes in the past. You can see the changes in the past, and there are minor changes proposed to this rear. That's the gable end of the building. This is the adjoining commercial unit. So this is the southern gable end. So the road is to the right, and there you can just see the Victorian porch. So now we're inside. This is the ground floor of the late Victorian element, so the higher element. So the road is here through these boarded up windows. You can see by the ramp that the ground floor is lower than the outside level. These cast iron columns are supporting the roof. They're there to be retained. You'll see the height of the ceiling here, and also the fact that it is an open voided space, albeit that it has been clearly divided in the past because the trace of the stud partitions is very clear on the ceiling. We'll come on to that in a second. One other point to note, members, is obviously that there is, except for the columns and obviously the windows, there's not a lot of architectural historic quality left in the building, and that's not down to the applicant. The building had a number of less than sympathetic alterations throughout the 1970s and up until it was vacated in the mid-1990s. This is upstairs in that late Victorian element, the ward area, and again you can see the open plan nature, but again you can see the traces of the previous subdivisions of this area. So it's not not always been an area of open plan. This is looking in the opposite direction in the same room. I remember Chair saying at briefing that it was good to have people in the photograph to give you an idea, members, of the height of these rooms. So they are of significant height. Again, there's not a lot of interior quality remaining in the building. It was stripped many years ago, and again you can see the traces of the stud subdivisions that occurred in the past. That shows those subdivisions again. So this is a photograph looking out of one of those first floor windows in the late Victorian element over that commercial unit, and you can see there's clearly employment uses in the locality, car hire, motor factors, storage and distribution, coach depot, to give you a flavour of the uses in the vicinity. So in the older element, you can see that a lot of the stud partitions actually were there from the outset. It was not an open plan space, and you can see these stud partitions remaining in some areas. And that's very important, that the spaces are actually were originally and still are very domestic in scale. They're not large hospital wards in the sense that people would expect from an interior. It is quite a modest scale of building. A period fireplace retained, again, no plaster on the walls, and you can see the traces of previous openings and an archway here, a segmental arch here. In the older element, there was a central chimney breast, again stripped many years ago. It is being retained as part of the proposal. Again, you can see stud work here, that the interior was divided, historically divided. These are not recent stud partitions. These are historic stud partitions. That is the newest stud partition upstairs, but there's an older one here. When I say new, I mean late 20th century. So just this is the same plan you've seen before, but I've just put it in again just so members can recall this subdivision of the external space. So these are the existing elevations. This is the principal facade facing the road, the more eclectic mix of windows at the back. Proposed elevations, there is a before and after alongside, but you can see, members, that the porch is retained, as is all the principal facade here. The staircase on this gable end, no new windows introduced on the south facing hip to gable end. External stack and chimney breast retained here. So no, the alterations are limited to this area, and we'll zoom in on that area now, so you can just do spot the difference here. A new sash window going in here, and just some very few minor alterations in this area, and that's the limit of those external alterations. And the windows dropping in here to get the light into the ground floor. It's very limited interventions. This is the existing ground floor. What you pick up here is those partitions, existing partitions in the older element. This is the older element here. And then this is the higher late Victorian element, which is currently open plan, but as members who've seen in the photographs, has been subdivided in the past. The proposed floor plans for the ground floor maintain as much of the open plan element of the ground floor in the late Victorian element as possible. Keep the subdivisions and the floor plan here, and if I go, you can see the comparison of the two. Top is the existing, bottom is the proposed, so you can see the replication of the floor plan. Stairs remain in the same place, all these walls remain in the same place, this area remains the same, and the interventions are limited to some partitions here, but with this open plan area retained here. And there's the two original columns retained as well in that open plan space. So this will be very much reading as an open plan space. First floor plan is existing. Again, the later Victorian element has that open plan field, but as we saw in the photographs, members, it has been subject to partitioning in the past. There's that central chimney breast in the older section, and there's clearly traces of partitions across this space in the past, original partitions that were removed at some stage, hence the chimney breast in the centre with fireplaces serving the rooms. So the proposal divides up this space, changing the partitions slightly, but as I said, it was always a series of domestic sized rooms in this space. Again, the open plan nature of the first floor ward is retained as much as possible. Again, we have the before and after to give members that sense of the changes that are being proposed, and I'll just dwell on that for a second. Obviously, we can come back, Chair, at any time if members want to see these slides. So I'll remain on that one. So it is clear that there is conflict with the local plan policies, some of the local plan policies. Policy Econ 2, and that's the protection of the employment space. And there's a degree of conflict with policy M16 of the local plan with regard to amenity. There's no doubt in that, at all. But members, you're reminded of two things. A, obviously the duties to preserve the architectural and historical qualities of the building. And it serves no one, not least the building, for the building to continue remaining empty. It's been empty now for 26 years. And the applicant has spent over £140,000 maintaining that building since they acquired it in 2012. Not converting it, just maintaining it, essential repair work. And, you know, it cannot be reasonably expected for the building to continue remain vacant and for them to be ploughing that money into the building. They obviously have duties as the custodian of a listed building to maintain its upkeep. So a clear material consideration is obviously the inspector's appeal decision in 2020. So you may ask, what's changed since that appeal decision? Well, firstly, the building has been marketed extensively for a number of years, and a lot of that marketing information was not before the inspector. The inspector was unaware of how extensively the building had been marketed. It had been marketed with Goadspeeds, and then in more recent years with Simmons and Sampson. And the marketing has, and so this critically is included pre-pandemic marketing and post-lockdown marketing. It's not been restricted to the pandemic period, and it has included internet marketing, and it has included signboards. The signboards, the Simmons and Sampson signboards, were actually still fixed to the building when I went to it last, and it had guide prices on it, but it also then had a significant period of marketing where basically all offers were being considered, and it was very on flexible terms and with a variety of employment uses considered. The site obviously now falls within Class E of the use classes order, which is, as members may be aware, a very varied number of uses can fall within that use, so offices, retail uses, etc. So it's been marketed rigorously by a recognised local agent experienced in those commercial matters. The other change that's occurred since the inspector's decision is changes to the proposed internal layout. So the inspector did have concerns with regard to the level of harm to this designated heritage asset, and the applicant has responded by proposing a layout that has more open plan areas than those ward areas, if members can recall from the proposed floor plan. So those are the two material differences since the inspector's decision: the marketing evidence before members, and then also those changes to the floor plan. I note that Dorchester Town Council have referred to another case which the council refused, and drawing comparisons to that in Dorchester. Now, forgive me, I'm new to Dorchester, so if I've pronounced this road incorrectly, I do apologise to anybody. I have it as Maunbury Road or Moundbury Road. And that decision, which was made earlier this year, in the autumn of this year, two critical differences there. Not the extensive marketing evidence before the council, and also, although, and I've taken a look at this building, it is clearly of some historic and architectural interest, it's not a listed building, so there are two differences there to consider. So really, members, the bottom line is this. This is a building that's been vacant for 26 years. It's a building that has constraints due to its listing, and those constraints mean that it's unsurprisingly unattractive to employment uses. There's no doubt that some employment uses want a building of historic or architectural interest, but they probably don't want it in this location, it's fair to say. And there are locations where listed buildings are on offer as offices, and they have they are in areas, conservation areas, for example, or with a bit more to them in terms of an aura and a character that would attract those particular types of offices. And sadly, this location is not one of them. It's, as you've seen from the photographs, surrounded by modern 20th century, 21st century industrial and commercial buildings. So do we want the building to remain empty? Is that in the best interest of the building to remain empty? No, it clearly isn't. Is a residential use the best viable use for the site? Well, given the lack of interest from the employment uses, I think it's time that we now say, well, in my opinion, it is time that we say, yes, it is. That's the viable use that puts the investment in the building and ensures that it's preserved for future sake, so future generations can enjoy and understand that history of the building as the former military hospital, and enjoy its architectural and historic delights. Is there still conflict with the local plan? Yes, of course there is, to a degree, with the loss of the employment use and to a degree the amenity uses. But I draw members to the attention with regard to the amenity uses that the Environmental Health Officer is satisfied that attenuation can be provided, and that is condition 5 on your report today, members. So I draw your attention to that, which responds to those amenity considerations. And speaking with the Conservation Officer, those amenity attenuation provisions do not harm the architectural and historical qualities of the listed building. And then secondly, you see that the Conservation Officer previously had concerns, and they're saying that there still is less than substantial harm, but they are clearly now advising that there is potential there for the public benefits of bringing the building back into use, outweighing that less than substantial harm. And I think, wrapping it up, Chair, the conclusions are we have got to that stage after 26 years of vacant use, where that hard decision has to be considered about getting a viable use to preserve the listed building. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon. That was a really very clear report on a most interesting challenge before the committee. It was a really very helpful report. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have a couple of representations to hear, but before I ask Jill to read those out, could I just correct an error I made when I did the roll call, and I included Councillor David Taylor in my roll call, and I shouldn't have done that, because though he's with us today, he's actually just listening in. He's not a member of this committee, so that was my mistake. So I'm just correcting that for the record. Thank you very much. So could we ask Jill now, could you read out the representation from Robin Potter of Dorchester Town Council for us first? Thank you very much, Jill.
Certainly. So, Dorchester Town Council's Planning and Environment Committee stands by its previous objections to the applications on this site. We consider that the air pollution, noise and disturbance caused by passing traffic and established businesses in the immediate vicinity would be significantly detrimental to the amenity of any future residents. The building is in the heart of Grove Trading Estate, in close proximity to many established businesses whose activities, including deliveries, are frequent and often incompatible with good living conditions. We are not convinced that the proposed amenity space within the building, even though it technically meets the 10% requirement, will be suitable for all residents. There is no provision for accessible outside amenity space for a considerable distance from the site. We do not see sufficient change from previous applications to go against the planning inspector's decision to reject the relevant appeal, as in the decision given at APP DI 1625/W/20 3248499. We are surprised that this recommendation is different to that for an application P/out/2021/00467, refused on the 27th of the 9th, 2021, which offered to create 9 serviced accommodation units on a site at 4 Mornbury Road, Dorchester, which is much closer to existing residential properties and amenity area, and which we think better suited to a change of use from employment premises. I thank you for your consideration of these matters and ask you that you refuse this application.
Thank you very much indeed. And next I'd like to invite the ward member, Councillor Fry, to speak in the ward member slot.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. Yes, thank you.
For information, I also speak on behalf of the other ward member, Councillor Andy Canning, when I speak. We're all very keen on more housing, and in particular for having new housing on a brownfield site makes lots of sense. But we should not allow properties to be built or converted where we're not prepared or willing to live ourselves. We all know that some people end up with little choice over the matter for a wide variety of reasons. The two previous planning applications for this site, planning and listed building consent, were rejected in 2019, and a subsequent appeal to the inspector was also dismissed only last August 2020. Nothing, I repeat, nothing in either the policy or site conduct has changed materially since that decision was made by the inspector just 15 months ago. The inspector made several comments, but perhaps the most significant was the following statement. I find that the proposed development of works would be too invasive and cause unacceptable harm to the special interest and significance of the listed building. The inspector also registered doubts that the proposal would secure optimum viable use of a designated heritage asset. We have before us a very slightly tweaked application with little change from previous submissions. The applicant has made attempts to sell the building, but are they serious? It's not really been done up or tarted or improved, make it suitable for use for anybody at the moment. Now, there are three reasons I think it should be refused: heritage, economic, and amenity. As I type, West Dorset now has 4.93 years of housing allocation, so we can be slightly more choosy about what we grant. We should simply not grant every request that comes before us, and this is one of those we should reject. We all want good quality housing, and although I do not doubt the potential quality of the applied conversion, the location and the loss of a historic building causes me some concern. This building has significant historical value, and the proposed change of use to residential would damage the heritage value of this former military hospital. This was commented on by the inspector, and the NPPF gives great weight to heritage assets. A paragraph within the NPPF states, in deciding whether to grant listed building consent, the local planning authority shall have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural value. This building is a significant asset for Dorset. It is the only military hospital that I know of, and there has to be a clear and convincing justification to change this building. This building is on a busy industrial estate. All moves to reduce its size or economic effectiveness should be resisted. The current local plan in section 5 of economy opens by saying the local plan can help deliver economic growth by enabling sustainable economic development in the right locations and providing homes for those who work in the area. Infrastructure provision is to meet the area's needs is important to facilitating its growth. Healthy economy is one that is enabled to grow in sustainable locations, unhindered by constraints of its surroundings. To convert premises in the heart of a marabout estate is to deliberately increase the constraints to businesses that will inevitably arise from conflicts between business, resident needs and activities. In terms of demand, record keeping of Dorset Council's own economic development property pilot service shows that statistically the highest and most frequently sought type of employment premises is small light industrial, which the old hospital has the potential to serve. To lose it to housing is to further reduce supply in an already undersupplied property sector. And a healthy economy was also one that provides space for all businesses and with places to start and grow. That the amenity is a serious matter as well, the lack of, and not all the proposed flats have this tiny space outside. I know that many flats do not have amenity, but they often have a balcony or a park. This is Dorchester, not an inner city high rise. Residents will be subjected to all the noise, smells and pollution by living in a busy industrial estate. The ground floor bedrooms are exposed to be on the roadside of the building, exposed to all the dust, smell, noise of passing vehicles and working garages. Vehicles being engine tested, lorries being loaded and unloaded, and many more unpleasant sensory attacks. The Dorset Council Senior Conservation Officer even makes some suggested reasons for potential refusal in the report dated July 21st. She says the proposal fails to preserve the special architectural and historic interest of the building and its significance as a designated heritage asset by resulting in harm to its significance. I could go on, but I won't now. The planning officer himself says there is a degree of conflict with the local plan policy insofar as the residential amenity of further future residents of the development could be affected by noise and disturbance from a nearby industrial and storage and the distribution of uses. And he says, however, the weight afforded to this matter is tempered by the fact that the residential amenity of existing residents is not affected. There are none on the estate. Those residents moving into the development will be aware of the surroundings when they decide to live in that location. They may not have a choice at all. This is a misleading statement. I also want to point out that this property is on a very busy road right through the middle of an industrial estate. Considerable flow of traffic through. Many are tradespeople or delivery people in a hurry to complete their tasks. Just yards away is a busy agricultural supplies firm that is open 7 days a week. Right opposite is a side road with access to several companies, including the timber yard and pet supplies. I am very surprised that highways haven't commented on all this. The road is a shortcut between the junction between Loader's Garage at the bottom of the Grove through to Poundbury, enabling traffic trying to avoid the top of town roundabout as to take a shortcut. Many of these vehicles speed, particularly when the trading estate is closed for business. So subsequently, there is realistically no quiet times from traffic on this estate. But more worryingly, is potentially less traffic equals higher traffic speed. I would hate to have children playing on the roads of this estate as they'd have nowhere else to play. The risk of killed or seriously injured being there is very real. I ask that you refuse this application on the basis of economic development, heritage and amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for the avoidance of doubt, and Councillor Fry knows this, Councillor Fry will now take no further part in this meeting because he's chose to speak in the ward member slot, so he will turn his camera and voice off. Thank you very much. Now we hear a submission read by Jill from the applicant Richard Burgess Associates. Thank you, Jill.
Madam Chair, Councillors, I act for the applicants regarding these proposals. Basically, the issue before you is a simple one. Do you want to see that this listed building is restored and put into beneficial use, or are you content to allow it to remain vacant as it has done for 26 years now and at risk? Let us be clear. Leaving the building vacant is not just a theoretical risk. During the time it has been vacant, there has been trespass and vandalism involving the destruction of plasterwork and partitions, deliberate fire damage inside the building, external damage to the brickwork from vehicles, illegal occupation of the grounds by travellers. My clients have already spent some £440,000 to restore the external fabric of the building, but need to spend considerably more, we estimate the same again, to restore the interior, fit electrics, plumbing, etc. Only residential use can viably achieve this. We have the figures to prove this. We jointly therefore need to find a beneficial use for the building. We have submitted evidence of marketing by Dorchester's premier commercial agents. Also, their considered opinion regarding the lack of current or future demand for offices of this type. Thirdly, the unsuitability of the building for commercial use. You cannot even get access into it using a pallet truck. We also consider the floor loadings would be an issue with commercial use. Great weight should also be attached to the following. There is no objection from Historic England. Your Conservation Officer also supports the proposals and considers they represent less than substantial harm to this heritage asset. And thirdly, we have addressed all the points raised by the appeal inspectors at the time of previous non-determination appeal. We would make one point about consultation responses. It is that the Environmental Health Officer appears to be unaware that at the time of the previous applications, we submitted a specialist noise consultants report. Its conclusions were that noise levels within the building from traffic and external sources would be acceptable, provided that habitable rooms facing towards the road were provided with secondary glazing. We can do this, if this is acceptable, on conservation grounds. Indeed, noise from the external environment is probably less and of much shorter duration than in main road locations where housing has been approved. Example, High Street, London Road. I make one more further point also by way of correction. There is a reference to the external amenity area being smaller than a double bed. This is factually incorrect. It is in fact 19 metres by 8 metres. An external amenity area is indeed a new feature proposed in the current applications. We consider your officer's report is well balanced and factually correct. We ask that you support its recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed, Jill. So members, first of all, do you have any questions for clarification? Anybody have anything that they would like to ask about this application? Yes, Councillor Stella Jones.
I don't want to ask, I want to make a statement, but I'll do that later.
Hold on, hold fire then, in case Councillor Heatley wants to. I'll come back to you. So, Councillor Heatley, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, this is a question, Chair.
Please, go far away.
There's a long passage in the report from 15.1 to 15.6, which is about the application of paragraph 11 of the MPPF and the tilted balance in this case. I must admit, I found that quite hard going. I think the conclusion is that we don't have to worry about paragraph 11 in this particular case, that we are not applying a tilted balance, but maybe I've got that wrong and I'd be grateful for clarification.
Simon, can you just clarify the tilted balance for us on this occasion?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So what I'm saying is it's not determinative in this case. So yeah, yes, it should be applied, but it's not determinative. What's more critical is that you apply the duties under section 16 and 66 of the Act. Councillor Fry referred to them as they're replicated in the MPPF, which is your duty to ensure that the historic and architectural qualities of the building are preserved. And then, of course, you've got your development plan policies as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. I think that means we can use our judgment either way.
So you've got to apply it alongside the policies, but it's not determinative in this instance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Hannah Smith. Yes.
Sorry, just comment on that very quickly. So the tilted balance, in terms of the tilted balance in this case, we have to go through the first exercise that Simon's explained, where we attach great weight to the significance of preserving the heritage asset. So the balance in that case is we have great weight to preserving the asset and its significance. We have to weigh the public benefits against that. So in this case, we've decided on balance that the public benefits of bringing the building back into a use and having the optimum use in that building and the other benefits of providing housing and such like outweigh the harm in this case, in this balance, based on the further information that's been provided. Once that's satisfied, we don't have to engage the footnote in the MPPF and we can re-engage the tilted balance, and we should grant the consent unless there's material considerations that indicate otherwise. So it does come into play, the tilted balance, if depending on the first balance that you carry out initially in terms of the heritage and safeguarding the heritage. But in this case, we're saying that's been satisfied, then we should move on to potentially grant consent unless there is demonstrable harm that you can identify.
All right.
Does that help?
It helps, yes. Happy. Does
Phil might want to comment on that as well.
Yes. I see that we have our solicitor. Are you wanting to comment too?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could just give the flip side to what Hannah just said. So Hannah's explanation perfectly correct if members follow the process as outlined, as recommended by officers.
Right.
But if members apply, consider the section 66 and listed building test in the MPF and do find that the harm to the listed building outweighs the public benefits, then that would engage the footnote to paragraph 11. So when you would go back and then not apply the tilted balance in your planning assessment. So you conclude, you would look at the listed building test first, conclude that there was harm to the listed building which didn't outweigh the public benefit, and then you'd apply the normal planning balance to the, having taken that into account and reached that conclusion, that would go into your normal untilted planning balance.
Right, I think
so it's complicated, but we can provide further guidance.
I was just going to say that it is complicated. It's one of those things that the more you explain it, the more complicated, the more words we put to it. But committee members, have confidence. You do know, you're very familiar with this, and you do know what you're doing, and neither Hannah nor Phil Crowther will let us go astray on this one. So be cognizant of what we're told, and then just apply a bit of common sense, and then we'll test that against against the solicitor's advice. But you know how to do this stuff. This is what we do every month, and you know what you're doing. Councillor Rideout, you had a question, and then I'm coming back to you, Councillor Jones, if there's no more questions. Belinda. I can't hear you, Belinda. I'm not sure if you're on mute or if it's your microphone. No. Still can't hear you. Now I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can now, yes, thank you.
I'm just going to keep very still then, because something's wrong with my microphone, I think. It was just a couple of points of clarification. Just like to say what a great report, Simon. Thank you very much. Regards to residential amenity, I note in condition 5, with regards to noise, there's going to be a full noise report, and that can be got over with acoustic panels and secondary glazing. I guess there's no problem with that in this building. I note actually on the south of the building there's an MOT and service centre, but on that actual side, on that elevation, there are no windows. Perhaps you could clarify if there are any other areas around there which are going to cause extra over noise to future residents. And also in the concerns, air pollution was mentioned. Is there a need for an air pollution survey in this area, or is this area no different to, say, Dorchester High Street, where there's residential properties? And on the divisions within the proposed divisions within the property, I take it these are stud walls. Will they cause irrevocable sort of permanent damage to the historic fabric of the building, or can that be reversed if necessary? Thank you.
3 excellent questions. First of all, Simon, air pollution.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ryder. So the air pollution guided by the Environmental Health Officer's comments, it is clear, and I think Councillor Fry expressed it very clearly. This is a commercial area. There are uses which will cause different types of pollution, but it's not an issue which the Environmental Health Officer has advised needs responding with either predetermination or via condition. I can only respond in that way, although there are general industrial uses in the vicinity of the site, so there are uses that will have a number of pollution characteristics. That is without doubt.
But as I think, just to be clear, I think what you're saying is that while it won't be as pleasant as some other places, if we were to say yes to this housing development, we would not be putting homes in a place where air pollution is specifically dangerous to the residents.
No, that's correct. There's no actual specific issue has been flagged up by the Environmental Health Officer, just merely the fact that it is in an area which includes general industrial uses.
Right, thank you. The next question then, I think, was about overlooking and specifically about whether there were windows or other activities that would impact on the amenity. I think the reference was to the end of the building with the MOT centre in.
So yes, Councillor Rideout's correct that south-facing gable end, the hip gable end, is blank and will remain so. If you can recall from the photographs, I took a photograph out of one of the first floor windows overlooking that building, that commercial building next door, the MOT centre, and there is, as again, Councillor Fry is very correct, the road along the frontage of the building is used by a number of commercial vehicles. I did go to the site at the weekend and also went to the site during an evening, and traffic levels were significantly lower. It was actually quite a quiet area. But having said that, I did check that the neighbouring uses don't have any planning conditions restricting them on time of use. So although it is quiet at the moment, there wouldn't be nothing stopping one of them actually opening at night. There is the coach depot behind the building. So Councillor Rideout, there are coaches that come in and out behind the building. Just I think in response to your query about the attenuation measures, there's the wall. There is clearly the ability to put secondary glazing on those windows. And if you recall from the photographs, I think your final question about the partitions, then the building has not had for decades the architectural any cornicing or skirting or anything that would be irrevocably harmed by the insertion of the partitions. The internal walls are without exception the brickwork. So there's no issue at all. There's not even plaster on those walls. So there's not an issue with regard to putting those partitions in place, and then the ability to reverse them and expose those voided areas again. And just to reiterate, there's clearly been that evidence of previous partitions in the building. You can see the traces of those partitions all over the ceilings in every single room.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I have a question from Councillor Brooke, before I take that, could I remind those members who are not members of the committee who are watching this meeting, you absolutely may not put comments in the comment bar. You are not members of this committee, and that's most improper. We have heard already from Dorchester Town Council, so please no more comments in the comment bar from people who are not members of this committee. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up on what Simon has just said about the coach park or the coach depot that's very quite adjacent to the buildings, has there any consideration been made of vibration levels, and also not just for the coach park but for delivery vehicles, probably quite large delivery vehicles, if there are significant industrial or commercial buildings very close, the actual vibration levels on the building itself? And that's one question. My second point is regarding the safety of residents who are, because it's been mentioned that obviously industrial estates almost shut down in the evenings and at weekends, or some do, some don't. But the actual physical safety, street lighting, safe pedestrian routes in and out of the area, has any consideration been made as to the safety of sort of individuals walking back to their accommodation at night? Is it considered a safe area, and is there any data that we could look at as to crime in the general vicinity?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, the vibrations, are there any regulations with regard to vibrations, and have we made any test of that?
It is an amenity impact, Chair. It's not something in this instance that's considered material to the to this particular case. I mean, the traffic levels. Yes, the commercial vehicles use the estate roads, obviously, because it's a commercial area. But obviously, the traffic levels and the commercial vehicle traffic levels are much higher on the classified roads in Dorchester. So if you proposing dwellings on one of the thoroughfares coming in and out of Dorchester, which would be a residential area, then you're going to get those vibration levels higher than here. I think my answer to councillors here is it's not a matter that's been raised by our environmental health inspectors as an amenity issue, and I don't think it's given the context of other areas with significantly higher levels of heavy goods vehicle movements and bus movements. It's not an issue that's material to the determination of this particular case. Sorry, Chair.
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you very much. I mean, I think members, we have to be advised about that environmental health, if these things were severe, environmental health would have picked them up. So there's no question that these amenity issues don't exist. We have to make a judgment about how severe they are. Yes, now a very good question about whether this is a safe area at weekends when it's not occupied, or when it might be occupied in a different way than a normal residential area. Again, could you comment on that?
No, it's a good question, Councillor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I mean, the estate roads on the estate, they have segregated footways. They are lit. There isn't the surveillance from other residential properties to and from the town centre. That is clear. So that is a matter that needs to be considered by members. I don't think it's determinative in this case. I haven't got records of the crime figures for the area, but it's clearly, as the applicant representative said in their statement, at the moment the building's vacant and it's getting targeted because it's vacant and there isn't that surveillance around. That gives you an indication that if people are coming to and from the site, walking back to their dwellings on the site, if it was granted, that they wouldn't have that surveillance. They'd be lit, it'd be segregated footways, so it's safe in a highway safety sense, but they wouldn't be overlooked. It's probably no different than stretches of road where they're along parks or along hedgerows, where there isn't that natural surveillance either. But it's clearly it is a consideration that members may wish to afford weight to. Although what I would, and solicitor might want to come in here, we don't actually have the figures, the crime figures before, so I can't actually give you advice as to whether it is an unsafe area. And as I say, thinking about it, with actually introducing the dwellings into the area will provide that surveillance and that occupancy in that area for other uses. So that's something to be balanced against.
It is. It's a balance, isn't it? Yes, because I mean, I think the fact that the empty building has been vandalised, that doesn't tell us anything, because it will no longer be an empty building. I'm pleased to hear that there are footways and there is some lighting, and it won't be an isolated building in the sense that there would be more than one resident there, but it will be more isolated than if you were in a Dorchester street. But then I suppose it's fair to say lots of homes are isolated. So again, that's another balance there that we have to put in the balance. I think I have no more questions, so I'm going to move on then to comments and debate, and I'm going to go back to Councillor Stella Jones, who's been waiting very, very patiently to start the debate point. Councillor Jones.
First of all, I agree that while this plan does restore the listed building, it is not suitable for residential. The applicant bought the building knowing it had been empty 26 years. He knew the state of the building, and I think going back to the inspector's report, it was only 15 months ago when the inspector said he hadn't had the evidence of it being advertised properly. In those 15 months, we've had lockdown, we've had COVID, we've still got COVID, and I'm sure employment opportunities would arise after the COVID was over. There are things that mixed use that probably haven't been looked at. I'm not an expert, but this is a very, very important industrial estate in Dorchester. We've got to keep our employment sites going. Otherwise, we're going to lose young people. We lose them already out of town. We need to have employment sites where young people especially can work. This is, as I say, an industrial estate. We've got to keep it as an industrial estate. We have very few in Dorchester, and it's for years and years we've refused anything other than employment on this and other industrial sites in Dorchester. Now, going on to housing, can you imagine yourselves living there? We've been told residents can be affected by noise and disturbance with all the things that are already there, the MOT centre, the traffic, and none of them have hours restrictions, so they could be working all night. I know they're not at the moment, and I know they're not working now at the weekends, but any new employment person coming in could want to work in the evenings, could want to work at night. They could be even noisier than the MOT centre. There's no restriction on what type of industrial activity goes on that site, and this is where we're hoping to put families to live. Going on to pollution, you've said that we can't really discuss that because the environmental health people haven't raised it as a big issue. But, you know, children's lives are harmed by pollution from traffic and from pollution from industrial sites. We must be aware of this. These flats are 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. There are going to be children living in there. And I think the point about a safe pedestrian route, fine, there is a pavement on there. Even in the daytime, if you walk through there, it's not very pleasant walking along the pavement. But at night, when there's nobody working there, there's probably not much traffic going through, and you're walking back into the middle of a quiet and empty industrial site in the dark, it's not going to be awful. It's going to be awful. Now, can I go on to actually the amenity space? There is very little amenity space. There's nowhere for children to play, nowhere for even to grow a few plants in plant pot. And as I say, there are going to be children living here. Where do they hang their washing, for instance? You know, we talk about climate. Well, people should be hanging their washing outside. There's nowhere there. But little things like that, they count when you live in a place. And so one of the flats has an outside staircase to enter it. Can you imagine taking up a child up that outside external staircase? Also taking up the pushchairs, prams, bikes, toys, whatever, because there's nowhere else to leave them outside. You've got to take the child up, leave the child at the top, and then hope they don't come down this external staircase. It's just not suitable for family homes. And as I say, 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, you will get children living there. And it'd just be awful. The danger for the children, and danger for the parents, and you know, like this equipment, there's just nowhere at all for it to go. And then we're also looking at people looking from windows, looking out on industrial buildings. Isn't that pleasant? Say if we got another lockdown and all you are doing looking from your window is looking at an industrial building. No greenery, no trees, nothing at all that's pleasant. I think it is completely the wrong place. I think I'd like to move refusal on policy Econ 2 and by amenity policy M16. It is just not the right place to have children. And it's all right saying residents would be aware of all this before they should be moving in. But should we really, as a council, be putting houses in, offering houses in places like this with noise and pollution on busy industrial estates with a lack of amenity? It is the wrong thing to do.
You've been very clear. Now, I've had, so from Councillor Jones, a proposal for a refusal. On grounds, Councillor Jones, you're saying on grounds of amenity?
Econ 2.
And Econ 2.
Yes.
I'd like to second that, Chairman.
Thank you. So who'd like to? Tim, Councillor Cook.
Yes, I totally agree that Stella's made the point far better than I can, but
right.
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible proposal.
Right. I have a lot of people who are waiting to speak, so to hold that thought. I'm going to hear the rest of the discussion before we come back to vote on that, which is the correct thing to do. So next, I have Councillor Matt Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I've spent the last few years banging on to officers about the need to utilise our heritage buildings and not let them fall into disrepair. And then along comes an application like this, and I feel as though I'm eating a large slice of humble pie. What we have here is residential and commercial worlds trying to mix, and to me, they don't mix. They are completely separate. In my opinion, this application is against the spirit of Section 8 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which is promoting healthy and safe communities. NPPF 110B states safe and suitable access can be achieved for all users. I'm really not sure that that can be fully achieved with a residential mix onto a commercial estate. NPPF 112A states give priority first to pedestrians and cycle movements, and I'm totally unsure whether this can be achieved on an established commercial and trading estate. NPPF 112C states creates places which are safe, secure and attractive, which minimise the scope for conflict between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. And again, I really cannot see how this can be achieved by mixing this. People's driving habits tend to mirror the environment that they're in, and many drivers on a commercial estate will be looking out for other lorries and heavy vehicles, not necessarily pedestrians, small children and cyclists. And I think the proposal to refuse this is the correct one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm adding your point there that you made extra about the highways concern. I think I'll have to come back to office on that because highways have not raised any objection to that. So I don't want to go. I'll check that out later, but hold that thought. I want to hear now from Councillor Carol Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to go against everything that people have said because I am very keen for this building to come back into some sort of use, and being empty for 26 years is just dreadful. Now, quite frankly, I can put my business hat on. If I was a business looking for premises in Dorchester, am I going to put my money into a building that needs that much care, restoration and ongoing maintenance and support? And frankly, in this day and age, no business is going to take that over. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And whilst personally, no, I wouldn't want to live there, but we are in an age of market. The market will decide whether these flats will be sold. And if they don't sell, well, that's market forces for you. But at least, you know, the building will be brought up and back into use. And so I am not going to support a refusal. I think the officers are quite right in their deliberations here. And I think there is a move to get empty retail units back into use for residential use. And this is perhaps not quite the same, but the building will be brought back into use and it will be used. And so therefore I am not going to support a refusal. I am in agreement with the officers on this. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Rideout, Belinda Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Brilliant. OK, I concur with what Councillor Jones has just said. This is a lovely old building, the old military hospital. It's just crying out for something to happen to it, it to be renovated, but put back into the state it should be. And if it wasn't for the applicant now investing all that money, it would be in a lot worse state than what we see at the moment. It's grade 2, it's in a sustainable location, it's within the settlement boundary. I'm very happy with what I've heard, the answers reference residential amenity. As to alterations to the building itself, out the exterior, there's very minimal. Interior, yes, I'm happy with what's been said. It's going to bring forward good accommodation, 1 times 1 bedroom, 3 2 beds and 1 3 bedrooms. Useful accommodation, and the big point here is people can choose if they want to live there, to choose to live there, they choose to live there. I understand it's been marketed. People don't want office space anymore. Things have moved on since COVID. So in my mind, I think any harm that's caused by this proposal is far outweighed by the public gain. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Heatley, Brian Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. First, I put huge weight on actually getting this building back into use and restored, because I fear that if we don't accept applications like this, it simply won't happen for the sort of reasons that Councillor Jones has put forward. On the other hand, I feel that there has been considerable exaggeration about the lack of amenity here. I've lived a lot of my life in London. In London, there are many mixed areas where there's light, industrial and commercial, cheek by jowl with the places where people live, and it works. People get used to it. No, I probably wouldn't personally want to live in this now, but for other reasons, like it's some way from the shops and that kind of thing, and I'm getting on a bit. At other points in my life, I would have been very happy to live there, particularly if I had a very busy job. I was out of work a lot of the time, and I wanted somewhere reasonably located in a large town. So there will be people who will live happily in this kind of accommodation. I think we need to be a bit more broad-minded about it. So I will not be supporting the refusal.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Councillor. I have nobody else who wishes to comment, so I'm going to come back now to Councillor Jones. You have proposed refusal. Can you give me then, please, the grounds on which you are recommending refusal, because that's what we have to vote on. So I think you're talking about amenity and that it's in conflict with Econ 2, that you think that the building should be maintained for economic use. So those are your 2 grounds.
And I'd like to add, if possible, just some of the grounds which Councillor Hall mentioned in his submission.
Right, which is to do with the highway safety.
To do with the the living conditions, yeah, and highway safety. Yeah.
Okay, so living conditions is amenity, so that's
okay.
Fine. And highway conditions, right. I'm going to now turn, if I may, to our officers. Just to we've had the ground. Could you just help us put those into proper planning language, so that we're doing this as well as we can? I'm not asking you to tell us what the grounds are. I think members have articulated those, but could you just help us a bit with getting them into proper planning speak? So we're doing as best we can with this.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I think the points that were raised were primarily amenity and the loss of the employment use, employment land. I'm not certain that members will want to go down the route of highway refusals, because we really clearly have not got a highway refusal reason. There's adequate highways that serve the site, pedestrian and vehicular. There's no good grounds there really to defend at appeal, so I'm not sure if there's other grounds that that could be included, that we want to include that or not, but I take advice from you, Chair, on that.
No, I would strongly advise that we don't go down the highways route, because it's just an emotional reaction, and the highways, the view from our highways team is that there's not an issue. So we need to just, so I would suggest not doing that. Is there anything we want to say about safety? Again, that's a highways issue. I'm not sure. I'm just
probably not in terms of highway safety, and I don't think we've got any evidence before us that this is an unsafe area, so I would caution against including. We haven't got any proper evidence on that, so appeal that would be tricky. There's some evidence of minor sort of vandalism of the building, but that's because it's not in use, and there's no evidence before us that there's a specific issue with crime in this area. And in Dorchester as a whole, I'm not aware of that being a specific, overriding issue of concern. I think the main points that were raised were the loss of the employment use on our, and that is a policy conflict. I think the problem is, though, we have had marketing, so councillors need to be mindful of that it has been marketed for a long period of time now. Yes. So whilst there's a conflict there, we need to be sure that at appeal potentially next time round, we have sufficient reasons to refuse the fact that it's on the employment site. The second reason, I think, related to poor levels of amenity for future residents through its location on the employment site, through impacts such as noise and disturbance and a lack of amenity space, contrary to policy ENV 16 of the Western Way local plan and the MPPF. So I think that was articulated well, and I think that's a position that was articulated. I think you just need to be more clear, potentially more clear on what we're saying about the loss of employment in view of what Simon's outlined in terms of the additional marketing there, and whether we want to proceed with that or not. But they I think were the two main reasons that Councillor Jones identified.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to see if Phil wants to come in, and then I'm going to ask Simon if he wants to say a little more about the employment aspect before. Phil, do you want to come in and give us a legal steer here?
Thank you, Chair. I just, in terms of how the reasons are refused, I think we need to know from Councillors Jones and Hook as proposer and seconder how they view the impact on the listed building, and whether they consider that the benefits outweigh the harm, because that affects whether you apply the tilted balance or not, and therefore that applies how the reasons for refusal are framed in terms of how those reasons are the reasons that they've put forward would apply to that balance.
Okay, so we put Councillors Jones and Stella and Tim, if you're thinking about that question, I'll give you a little bit of, because you have to answer that question, but I'm going to turn to Simon and see if you want to say a little bit more about because the question of the economic conflict with the economic policy and your view on how it's been marketing, just so members have a full picture here. And then I'm coming back to you, Stella.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously there has been the marketing for a number of years, and there's been the internet marketing, and obviously the signboards on the site. It's sort of, how long is a piece of string? How long do you market a building through particular economic cycles before it's considered that there's it's been done robustly? We've got evidence that it's clearly been marketed by Simmons and Sampson, and it's been actively marketed, and it was marketed pre-pandemic as well as post-pandemic. Obviously, the inspector had limited information before them previously, albeit they did acknowledge that the building had been marketed. Now, in this case, and just going from what Philip was saying, if I just referred members to 7.8 in the report on that, clearly there the inspector and therefore with the reference to the footnote in the MPPF, the inspector was saying that were the public benefits, but he was not convinced at all that the building, the residential use was the best way to secure the optimum viable use, because in the inspector's view there was that harm arising from the interventions. The inspector clearly on that balancing exercise was putting great weight to the harm that was arising from the interventions proposed to the listed building. Now the changes, there have been changes. I think Councillor Fry in his presentation said that there were, and forgive me if I'm misquoting Councillor Fry, but there were minor changes. There have been changes, and in my opinion, they are material changes to the proposal, with those voided areas in the former ward areas. And I think that balance has changed, and there is the less than substantial harm arising from the interventions and the public benefits derived from bringing the building back into use and from the creation of the dwellings towards supply. But members, if you feel that harm is greater, then that balance would drift, and as Philip said, you wouldn't apply the tilted balance, because the harm to the listed building is the consideration, well, not the duty then that means that the tilted balance doesn't apply. Just with regard to the amenity considerations, my word of caution to members on the amenity considerations is that the matter was not raised as a determinative issue by the inspector last time round. They focused on the employment loss and the interventions to the listed building as their determinative issues. And secondly, you have your environmental health officer advising that the matter can be dealt with by condition on the amenity issues. So that's just something to consider on those matters. Although clearly it is a material planning consideration. You can't get away from the fact that there are those commercial units next door. And just on the, so just going back, Chair, forgive me, I'm rambling a bit, but the loss of the employment use, it is there is no sort of hard line in the sand that says there is 2 years of marketing and therefore that's the test being done. So it is in a way a subjective judgment as to whether the marketing that's been undertaken, which has been for a number of years and has included internet and has included the signboards, whether that is sufficient marketing to demonstrate that all uses have been explored, all employment uses explored. And just as a final one, you've seen the photographs, members, and I think some councillors spoke very clearly about this. Is that building really, as a listed building with those rooms and that layout, really a building that could attract a light industrial or general industrial user? No, not really, because of the fabric, the historic fabric of that exterior. Could it attract offices? Well, that's where the marketing has taken place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Phil, did you want to come in finally?
I did, yes, Chairman, because I
yes,
may have misunderstood Simon's response earlier. I'm just looking at his report in terms of in the tilted balance, and just want to say I think I may have misunderstood the answer earlier, because I think the report is saying, and this goes back to Councillor Heatley's question earlier, that because there are relevant development plan policies and those relevant plan policies are not out of date for this application, then the tilted balance wouldn't be engaged either way. So if I'm right on that, then my earlier point to councillors Jones and Cook would mean that they don't need to think about which balance they're applying, because on either consideration it would be your normal planning balance in accordance with the development plan.
Let's hope so. Is that Simon, that's your understanding? That's what you meant to say?
Not quite. I did say I'd say that the development plan, the basket of policies most relevant are not out. Many are not out of date. There is obviously the policy about the strategic and housing supply, which is in my mind out of date. And I'll defer to Philip's legal mind on this. I would say that the tilted balance would still apply alongside but the development plan policies take primacy. So in a way, the chronology of events is you look at the duties first.
Yes.
Section 16, section 66. Those you have to, they're requirements. Then you look at your development plan primacy, and then you've got to then apply the tilted balance, unless you're considering that one of the footnotes in the NPPF apply, such as the harm, one of your reasons for refusal is due to the harm to the listed building.
And
very complicated, and I've probably confused myself in the answer.
But we have not, that our proposers have not put the listed building as the harm to the listed building as one of their reasons for refusal. They're concerned with amenity and economic provision. So therefore, I think the tilted balance still is in play.
Chairman, that would be my understanding. Is they by not putting harm to the listed building as a reason for refusal, the implication would be that they consider the public benefits would have outweighed that. Well, either that, or they consider contrary to the officer's views, because I think the officer view is that there is harm and that harm is less than substantial.
Yes.
You need to give that great weight in the planning balance, and there has to be significant public benefit to overcome that harm. So I think you're right. The implication is that they must have considered that test is met, so that you're back to the ordinary planning balance and not the tilted balance. If our assumptions are correct.
That's right. Our proposer and seconder, are our assumptions correct? Is that the way in which you wish to proceed with this? Because you're the proposer and the seconder, and I need you. It's your job now to put this forward. So are you? Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to proceed this way with it.
Right.
It is so important to keep in the industrial site as an employment area.
Right. So members, we are now going to put this to the vote that we are refusing this application on grounds of amenity and economic the conflict with the economic policy. And the discussion of amenity has been in slightly more detail than that one word covers, but we are not including highways, and we're not including safety, because we are advised that those are not very strong grounds. If nobody's frowning at me, I'm going to proceed now to put this to a vote for a refusal. When I call your name, will you tell me if you're voting with the proposal to refuse? So if you're saying for, you're voting to refuse. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Heatley. Councillor Heatley.
Sorry, I hadn't got my thing on. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Carol Jones.
I
Against.
Councillor Emma Parker.
For.
You're for refusal. Councillor Apothecary.
Against.
Councillor Rideout.
Against.
Against. Right. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for refusal. 1, 2, 3, 4 against. So it would appear that your minded to decision is to refuse this application, members. I'm waiting for someone to come in and make sure I've got my numbers right, but it would appear that your minded to decision is to refuse this application on grounds of amenity and contrary to economic policy. I now turn therefore to Anna Lee, who is the service manager for planning. Sorry? Somebody is saying something to me I can't hear.
Sorry, Chair, can I come in? Are you able to vote on this at all, or is it something you can't do? This is Carol Jones.
I can vote on it, but if I do, then the vote will, all I will do then is make the vote even.
So your vote won't carry it one way or the other?
Well, it would, because if I vote, then I then make it even, then I would have to use my casting vote.
And are you not willing to do that on this application? Sorry.
It's not, I don't generally, but well, since you've asked me, that's a very fair question. All right, I think then, since I do have a view on this one, I will on this occasion then use my vote, and in which case I will vote against the proposal. And that means, and we are now even, aren't we? Which means I then use my casting vote against the proposal, and the proposal to refuse then falls.
Thank you, Chair.
Never done that before, but it is an entirely reasonable question to have asked me and an entirely legitimate thing for me to have done. So that proposal then falls. I now return then to the substantive motion we started with, which is the officer's recommendation to approve. And we now put that to the vote. Unless anybody else has anything else they want to say, we move straight on to putting the proposal to approve to a vote. Phil, am I doing this right?
So I think, strictly speaking, that it's the officer's report simply gives a recommendation. So you do formally need a proposer and a seconder.
I do, yes, thank you. Yes, you're quite right. So I would now like to call for a proposer and a seconder to support the officer recommendation. Is there anyone who would like to do that?
I am happy to make the proposal, Chair. Carol Jones.
Thank you, Carol Jones. Can I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Chairman. Belinda.
That's Councillor Carol Jones proposing, Councillor Belinda Rideout seconding, and now we are going to now put this to a vote. Again, I'm going to come through alphabetically, and this time we are voting in favour of the officer recommendation. So just to remind you that if you're voting for the proposal. If you're voting against the proposal, unlike last time. Councillor Andrews.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
Councillor Carol Jones.
For.
Councillor Stella Jones.
Against.
Councillor Emma Parker.
Against.
Councillor Apothecary.
For.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
For.
And right, and then we are in the same, so we're now 1, 2, 3, 4. Are we in the same voting position as we were before, George?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, in which case, in order for this to move forward, who have I? Yes, in order for this to move forward, I have to use my vote, and I am voting this time in favour of the recommendation. Are we now tied, George?
Yes, that's right.
So I'm using my casting vote to vote in favour of the recommendation. That recommendation is now carried. So I now turn to Anna Lee, because we have just done our minded to vote, Anna Lee, would you give us your decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that I've heard the full presentation and the debate. I'm not aware of any reason to differ from the minded to resolution of the committee, so this application will be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have to take a second vote, and this time, just to be clear, and I beg your pardon, I should have made it clear that I did explain that we're voting twice. So that was the vote on the planning application. Building application, which is LBD 2021-00827, and this is the listing building application. So could I now run through it again? Oh, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Apothecary.
Val Apothecary is proposing.
Jones, Carol Jones.
Carol Jones is seconding. Have you got that, George? Lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Right, we are now going to go through and vote once again, members, this time on the listed building application. And Councillor Andrews.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Heatley.
For.
Councillor Carol Jones.
For.
Councillor Stella Jones.
Against.
Councillor Emma Parker.
Against.
Councillor Val Apothecary.
For.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
For, Chairman.
Thank you. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So are we now tied again?
We are tied, yes.
Because we had one abstention. In which case I will use one vote. I don't have to use my casting vote this time. I will vote for the recommendation, and that makes the recommendation carried in minded to. I must now go back to Anna Lee and ask you for your decision, please, Anna.
Thank you, Chair, and I confirm this will be approved in line with the minded to resolution. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Good. Okay. I think it was a bit procedure heavy, that one, but we got there in the end. Thank you very much. We've been running for an hour and a quarter. Members, are you minded to have a small comfort break now before we move on to the Sir Nabis application? No, I won't ask you. I will suggest it. Members, could I suggest a 10-minute comfort break for everybody to get another glass of water, whatever you need, and we will reconvene then at oh, actually no, let's reconvene at 12 noon, otherwise it will be getting in the middle. We'll reconvene at 12 noon. If you can all make sure your cameras are off, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, just a point of order before we
Just
Are you there, Chairman?
Sherry, you're on mute. I don't know whether you're talking.
Thank you very much. So it's now 12 o'clock, so welcome back, members, from that short comfort break. I'm not required to take another roll call apparently after a comfort break, so I will assume that you're all back in the room. And we will move on now to our next agenda item, which is agenda item C and D. And again, this is two applications that we will have here and discuss together. The first is for the planning application and the second is the listed building application. But as before, we will have a single report and a single discussion, and then we will vote twice. Good. Verity Murphy, Senior Planning Officer, if you're with us, we'd be pleased to hear your report. Thank you very much, Verity.
Chairman, sorry to jump in. It's
Yes.
Phil Rather. It was just, I think, just as you left the meeting before the adjournment, Councillor Cook raised a point of order on his.
Councillor Cook's not a member. Councillor Cook's not a member of this committee.
Of course.
Yes. Councillor Cook is a member of the
with
committee.
With respect, Chairman, I am a member of this committee.
Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, that's my confusion. So Verity, before we move to you then, Councillor Cook, did you want to make a point?
I was just asking, this has the potential to sound like sour grapes, but my reading of the way that vote was taken was that we were nearly going to move to the next item. My understanding is that it is the chairman's duty to call for any votes, not individual members of the committee.
Yes, which is what I did.
I appreciate that as chairman, you do have a vote and you might want your views to be taken into account. However, my personal view was that you were content to move on before you had to use your vote and your casting vote. I just set that out as my understanding.
No, you're entirely wrong. I always consider whether or not to use my vote as the votes are being cast and at the end of the vote, because then I know whether or not I need to use my vote and whether or not I wish to use my vote. And you will notice that I very often say at the end of a vote, well, I will not be using my vote on this occasion. But just to be absolutely clear, as well as being the chairman, I am a member of this committee.
I appreciate that.
I do have the vote. And I do have the right to use that vote on occasion. And on this occasion, I chose to do so. And that was entirely legitimate. And I wouldn't want it to be called into question. I'm a member of this committee and I do have a right to vote.
Every member of the committee obviously has to make their views known.
Quite. Thank you very much. So there's no point to raise. We're absolutely legitimate. Councillor Penfold, you wanted to say something?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Looking at this application, I am the mental health champion for the council, but I have no connection with this at all. Thank you.
That's very helpful to know that. Thanks very much. We've got some fairly savage feedback here. I'm not sure who's, it's gone, the feedback's gone. Okay, has anybody else got any thing to say before we start with? No, excellent. Verity, I interrupted you. Your presentation when you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for an extension to the rear of the existing care home with works to provide 20 extra care accommodation units. Here we have the constraints map. The application site is shown here. It's a grade 2 listed building. The pink shows the scheduled monuments nearby. So this is the location of the Cerne Abbas giant. The green lines show that it is within the AONB. And it's also important to note that the site is not within a defined development boundary. This is an aerial image of the site, so you can see the existing care home here. The extent of the site is shown in red on the location plan here. There is a farm to the north of the site. This is a historical image of the original building. It was built in the 1830s in a cruciform layout, so this cross shape, and it was originally used as a workhouse. Over the years, the building has been extended, so the original building is shown in white. It has had some extensions in the 1960s, shown in blue, and the yellow is the extensions in the 1990s. As the extension is connecting to the rear of the care home, it's actually connecting to a 1990s extension rather than the original historical fabric of the building. So this is the proposed site plan. So you've got the existing care home here. It will be connected to the extension by the single-storey glaze link. A lot of work has been undertaken to get the layout correct, and the overall layout and design of the extension has evolved positively following on from pre-application discussions. So it's now laid out in 4 separate blocks to reflect the original cruciform layout of the listed building. So here are the existing elevations. So we've got the south elevation of the building and the eastern elevation. The eastern elevation is the front of the building. This is the northern side elevation and the western elevation, which is the rear of the existing care home. Here are a couple of photographs of the front of the existing building taken from the main road. So these are the proposed elevations for the extension. And we have the north facing elevation at the top. So you can see it's connected to the main care home by this single-storey glaze link, which helps to separate the original and extended parts of the care home. This is the east-facing elevation, which faces back on to the care home. So the overall elevations and form of the building is broken up by using linking and recessive elements. This helps to ensure the proposal does not appear as one continuous block of built form, and it helps to reduce the impact on the AONB and the listed building. Here we have some more elevations. So we have the south facing elevation and the west facing elevation. This will be the rear of the extension. The materials to be used have been chosen carefully. So they're natural materials such as stone and timber cladding, and this helps the proposal to recess into its sensitive location and helps to reduce the visual impact from the ANOB. These are some proposed visuals. So we've got the view looking northwest towards a proposed building, and this is the single-storey communal link. This is the view looking southwest towards a new entrance and single-storey link to the existing Casterbridge Manor. The proposed extension is set lower than the ridge height of the main care home. It will be constructed also with a green roof. This helps to ensure its subservience to the listed building, but also to reduce its impact from the surrounding AONB. This is the view from the top of the pedestrian ramp at the rear of the site, looking towards the west facing elevation, which is the rear of the extension. This is a proposed landscaping plan. You've got the existing care home here and the proposed extension laid out in 4 separate blocks. The boundary hedges will be retained and reinforced if necessary. There will be new tree planting in the rear of the site, a new communal lawn and pergolas with climbing plants. There There will be biodiversity improvements and biodiversity gains with this proposal. This is the southern side elevation of Casterbridge Manor as it currently stands. The new extension will be located behind this, and as you can see, this existing hedgerow will afford the site screening from the wider AONB. This top photograph is looking at the rear of the care home to which the extension will attach to. This is the existing western boundary, so you can just see glimpses of the existing care home and where the extension will be located. Now this photograph is looking northwards on the A352, and you can again just see glimpses of the existing care home through those trees. A lot of concern has been expressed in regard to the impact of the development on the scheduled monument at Giant's Hill, which is the Cerne Abbas giant. From that viewpoint, you can already see the existing care home. The proposed extension will be lower in height with a green roof and tucked in behind the existing care home, so it's not considered to result in any significant visual harm, and it's not considered to have any harm on the Cerne Abbas giant or its setting. So here are the key planning matters. So the site is not located within a defined development boundary, but I consider there are material considerations which would outweigh this harm, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The scale, design, impact on character and appearance is considered to be appropriate. There are not considered to be any significant impacts on amenity. There's not considered to be any significant impacts on landscape, and no harm has been identified to heritage assets. There are economic benefits associated with the scheme, and there are no concerns with access, parking, flooding or drainage. Okay, so the recommendation is to grant, subject to conditions. The proposed development would result in much needed extra care accommodation for which there is a demonstrable need. The proposals would also contribute to the area's 5-year housing land supply and would result in an economic benefit through allowing an expansion of existing business, which will provide additional employment opportunities. The proposed extension is sensitive to its setting, the existing Grade 2 listed building on site, scheduled monument, AONB and conservation area. The proposal will result in no harm to the listed building. The proposal will result in landscape and biodiversity improvements on the site, and overall the benefits of allowing the proposal are considered to outweigh the harm caused by allowing an extension to an existing building in the countryside. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my presentation.
You're on mute, Chair.
So thank you very much, Verity. Another excellent report and an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. All very clear. We have some written representations to hear now, first from the ward member, Councillor Jill Haynes, and then from Joe Witherden on behalf of the applicant. So Jill, if you'd like to read the first of our written applications.
Certainly, Chair. I am very aware of the concerns raised by both the public and the Parish Council regarding this application at the parish meeting. I'm most grateful that you agreed to bring this matter to committee, as there is a clash between the neighbourhood plan priorities, local views and the planning reasons and considerations that are pertinent to Offa's recommendations. I understand that some of the objections from the Parish Council are not valid planning reasons to object and cannot be included in your considerations, but by coming to committee, this does give both the Parish Council and the general public the opportunity to have their say in the decision-making process. I feel that the officer has done a really good piece of work here to agree with the applicant alterations to the original application to alleviate many of those local concerns. This is an excellent report which weighs up the advantages and disadvantages of the application and comes down to supporting the development. We don't thank our officers enough for the time and effort they put into these planning applications. I realise I will probably not be popular locally in this, but I can find no valid planning reasons to object to this application, and I agree with the officer's recommendation. And now comments from Joe Witherden, Dorset Planning Consultant.
We've had no written representation from the Town Council, have we? They made their representations, but nothing to the committee.
Yes, that's correct, Chairman.
That's fine. Okay, just that's lovely. Yes, thank you very much, Jill. Yes, let's hear from Joe Witherden for the applicant.
Okay. I represent the applicant, who is responsible for the Cerne Abbas care home. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. Many of you will be familiar with this landmark building, which stands on the edge of Cerne Abbas as you travel along the A352 from Dorchester to Sherborne. It has been a care home for about 30 years now and provides a valuable service to the local community. Under new management in 2016, it achieved a good rating in its latest CQC assessment and employs more than 80 staff. The current proposals have been put forward to help ensure that business can continue on a sound financial basis and is reaching to the need for more flexible extra care accommodation that works successfully alongside care home provision. It will provide a better service, more jobs, and meet a clearly identified housing need for our area. We know it is a sensitive site, a Grade 2 listed building in the OMB, which is why we took pre-application advice from your officers, the conservation and the AONB teams, and engaged with the community. With every household, sent a leaflet inviting them to comment. We think we took on board all comments in coming up with the scheme in front of you. We are pleased that the scheme is supported by both the Conservation and Landscape officers. And whilst the Parish Council have objected to the scheme's design, the residents did respond to our consultation. I'll just read that again. Whilst the Parish Council have objected to the scheme's design, the residents that did respond to our consultation were more enthusiastic. More than 90% supported the idea of expanding the facilities. 95% agreed the option we have gone for was the best of the three concepts, and there was general support for the layout, scale, roofing and landscaping components. No residents objected to the application. There was no public other than us at the Parish Council meeting at which this application was discussed. The Parish Council have suggested the scheme is major development in the context of the NPPF, but this is not the view of your advisors. To do so would mean that it would, quote, have a significant adverse impact on the purposes for which this area has been designated or defined. Therefore, it does not need to meet the exceptional circumstances and public interest tests in the NPPF, although the acute and growing need for extra care provision would tick these boxes. As a professional planner, I have looked at the scheme and believe that it accords with the development plan as a whole, and so does your own officer. The scheme has been sensitively designed with its context in mind, will meet a clear need, will provide social and economic benefits, and we ask that you approve the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, have you any questions or points for clarification? I'm not, nobody's
Chairman, yes, sorry, I couldn't get my microphone to work.
Councillor Rideout, ask your question.
I've got a couple of just simple questions really for Verity. Reference to the glass, proposed use of glass, will this glass be obviously anti-glare, tinted glass, because obviously viewpoints from sensitive areas? And secondly, with regard to condition 8, landscape management plan for all landscape areas, will that include the green roofs to ensure their continued maintenance? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your question. In terms of the glass, I'm not entirely sure at this stage whether it is tinted or anti-glare, but we do have a materials condition on the consent, so we can have a look at that at a later date and ensure that that glass is appropriate for its setting.
Thank you.
In terms of the landscape management plan, there is an approved plan on the approved plans condition in terms of how that green roof will be maintained and accessed.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
So that is conditioned. I've noticed Councillor Andrews in the chat pile there, but I'll just take the rest of the questions first. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, actually. Coming back to Cerne Abbas Parish Council's reasons for objection. At the bottom of their bullet points, it says development contrary to the Cerne Valley Neighbourhood Plan and the local plan. Did they expand on that in any of their correspondence with us? Because I can't see any specific references as to how this development is contrary to those plans.
Thank you. I believe at the top of their objection letter, I think the main concern that they have is the fact that it is a major development outside of the defined settlement boundary, which would be contrary to the overall aims of the Cerne Valley Neighbourhood Plan, and also to some extent policy HOUS 5 of the local plan.
Thank you.
Happy with that? Good. I'm seeing a wish to move to the vote here, but before I do that, I must just make sure anybody else has anything else, any other comments at all they'd like to make about this application.
Could I ask a question, Chairman, please?
You can indeed. Thank you very much.
Yes. Could you just enlighten me a bit more on the tree planting around the car park?
Yes, certainly. So the tree planting in the car park, so there's going to be 16 new native trees planted in the rear section of the car park. There'll also be, there's some pergolas. There'll also be climbing plants grown into the pergola as well. And there'll also be an area of wildflower meadow as well outside of the, I think it's the southern elevation of the extension.
Not being fussy, but do we know what, or have we stipulated what trees we're likely? I'm thinking of the impact, because obviously you can come round a bend to this and you would see, and it will have an impact. Have we got an idea of what trees, or have we stipulated what trees we're going to plant?
Yes, thank you. In the landscape plan and also in the design and access statement, there's an indication of the types of trees which will be planted. I can't remember those off the top of my head, but they are native trees and they are considered to be acceptable by our landscape officers.
Thank you very much. That was what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Any more for any more? In which case, Councillor Andrews, would you like to say out loud to the committee that you'd like to propose this?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to propose that we grant subject to conditions laid out in the report.
It's very helpful. Councillor Ryder, you were wanting to second.
Yep, very happy to second. Great scheme.
Thank you very much. That's a proposer and a seconder. I think we can move to the vote. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just for clarity, the first vote we're going to take is on the planning application, which is P 2021-0300, which is the planning application. And when I call your name, if you would tell me whether you are for or against. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Cook?
For.
Councillor Pry?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Heatley?
For.
Councillor Carol Jones?
For.
Councillor Stella Jones?
For.
Councillor Emma Parker?
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold?
For.
Councillor Val Pothecary?
For.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout?
For.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. I will now go to Anna Lee. You've heard our minded to vote. Anna, can I have your decision?
Thank you, Chair. I confirm this application will be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And members, if you would just bear with me, we have to do it all over again now. I'm going to ask you now to vote on the listed building application, which is P2021 LBC 03001. So
sorry,
we're now
Chair. Chair, do
yes.
I need to propose that again, don't I?
Yes, please. That's exactly.
I'll propose grant.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews has proposed. A seconder, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Rideout has seconded. Lovely. Right, and off we go again then. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Cook.
4.
Councillor Fry.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Councillor Heatley.
4.
Councillor Carol Jones.
4.
Councillor Stella Jones.
4.
Councillor Emma Parker.
4.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
4.
Val Apothecary.
4.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout.
4.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Anna, could I have your that was our minded 2 vote. Could I have your decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application will be approved subject to condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, that brings us to the point in our committee where we must break, because the agenda says that the next agenda item will be on at 2 p.m. So that brings to the end of this session. Members, could I ask you please to log out of this meeting and log straight back into the meeting that is on your calendars for 4 o'clock, and we will then have our session on the appeals with Hannah Smith. That's fine. Councillor Fry, you wanted to say something before I bring the meeting, this part of the meeting to an end.
Just waiting till the live bit goes dead.
Thank you. Let's wait. Thank you very much. If you could then, adjourn this meeting then until 2 o'clock. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.